Good evening, guys. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Brooke, joining live from Boston, Massachusetts, as we discuss WorldTeach in Costa Rica. So thanks to the guys that have signed on to listen. You joined us a bit early, so thank you for your patience. We're just waiting for a few more, but they can join us as they log on. We're expecting over 40 people tonight, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for taking the time tonight to listen in as we talk about teaching and living in Costa Rica. We're super excited tonight because we actually have the current field director on the line, as well as two previous alumni, myself, Brooke, and our admissions coordinator, Caitlin. So we're just going to get right into this. I know that everybody has pressing questions about Costa Rica. So just a bit about all the people listening in. We've got some people that have just been accepted into the program, others that are, interested in learning more about whether it's WorldTeach or Costa Rica in specific, and those that have, just started their applications. So let's do this. Okay, so here's our agenda for the night. So we're going to spend a few minutes meeting our great panelists who are joining us from Costa Rica and from the States. We're going to learn a bit about their backgrounds, and then we'll get into the specifics of our Costa Rica program. So that includes our partnership with their Ministry of Education, why there's a need for our volunteers, and the support that's provided for the volunteers, which of course includes the funding that comes from the ministry and also the volunteer fee. So those are very important things we'll be discussing pretty soon. From there, we'll focus on being in the classroom. So how are these placements made? When will you receive them? Because we all need to know that. What sort of cultural challenges will you guys be encountering? And what are the resources that you will or probably won't have? Afterwards, we'll be discussing living in Costa Rica. So what are the housing placements like? With whom will you be living? Monthly stipend, what activities are volunteers involved in outside of the classroom, because this is your life as well. It's not just work. So that's when we're going to get to hear personal experiences from our alumni that are on the line with us. At the end, we're going to quickly address our volunteer qualifications and the application process before we dedicate some more time to questions and answers for our panelists. So that brings me to the fact that all of our listeners, you guys are muted at the moment. If you want to be unmuted, you can kind of raise your hand or actually just type in your question. So you can type in those questions as the webinar is going on. And Caitlin, who's on the line with us, she's going to try to answer them for you. And then it might actually be a question that we'll answer together as a group. So if we don't respond right away, no te preocupes. Don't worry. We will get to it. I promise. You guys all have some really great questions. So definitely send them in. Okay, let's start. All right, that's me. So allow me to quickly introduce myself. Again, my name is Brooke. I'm the Director of Recruitment here at WorldTeach. But much more importantly, I was a volunteer last year in Colombia. So loved teaching. It was pretty incredible, and I became quite connected to my work there and the organization in general. So for that reason, I'm now staying on with the organization here in Boston. So it's a picture of me with my 6th graders in Bogota, Colombia. I'm the only one on the line tonight that is not obsessed with Costa Rica. Sorry, guys. Mi corazón está en Colombia. But the rest of the people will tell you about La Pura Vida in Costa Rica. And on that note, Caitlin, would you like to introduce yourself?
I would definitely like to introduce myself. I've already virtually introduced myself to a lot of the people who are listening today. We've been corresponding, and a bunch of you guys have already asked me a lot of questions, which I love. You should keep asking me them. So my name is Caitlin. It's really nice to see all you guys on the line. Like I've mentioned before, I'm the admissions coordinator, so I've been corresponding with a bunch of you guys who are listening tonight. I studied English and Spanish at Notre Dame, and when I was between my junior and senior year at Notre Dame, I was lucky enough to be in the WorldTeach Costa Rica summer program. That was an incredible experience, just a beautiful month. I was placed in this tiny little village called San Martín de Puis, about 200 people, and it was just an incredible experience, and it really set me on the path to international education, so I decided to get my master's. I taught on the U.S.-Mexico border for a few years, and then after that, I guess I just wasn't done traveling. I wasn't ready to go back to New England, so I moved to South America. I lived in Quito for a short while, and then I lived in Santiago, Chile. And that's where that picture is from. That's my kindergartners in Santiago, Chile. But I can definitely say that it all started with Costa Rica. I don't think that if I hadn't had that experience, I don't think I would have ended up going to all those places. So it was an incredible experience.
Awesome, Caitlin, thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to the rest of our panelists. Here we go, Flynn, our current field director in Costa Rica. Flynn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, sure. Welcome, guys. Thanks for signing in. It's exciting that we have so many signed up. So I'm originally from Central Illinois, and I graduated college in 2010. And as soon as I graduated, that January after, I moved down to Costa Rica for the first time to be a WorldTeach Costa Rica volunteer. I was there for the whole year in 2010, moved back to the States for a little bit, started a master's in international comparative education, which I'm still in the final processes of submitting that thesis. But I came back down in August of 2012, so a little bit over 2 years ago, to take over as the field director, and I've been down here ever since. It's been the most incredible experience and journey. And if Brooke's heart in Colombia, my heart is and will always be aquí en la pura vida.
Siempre. Yeah, awesome. So, Flynn, I have a question for you. How did you first come across WorldTeach, and why did you, decide to join, and why Costa Rica?
Well, I knew that I was eventually wanted to go and get my master's, but I wasn't sure in what. And I also wanted an opportunity to kind of test out teaching to see if it was for me before committing to either a certification or a master's. I studied abroad in Spain for my entire junior year of college, and when I came back my senior year, I worked alongside the study abroad coordinator as his assistant. And during that time we talked about my future and what I should do, and he had mentioned WorldTeach to me, so I looked at the website at that point, and then I knew I wanted it to be a Spanish-speaking country, and I wanted it to be elementary age students. So all those kind of major characteristics fell into place with Costa Rica.
Perfect. Fantastic. Very nice. 1 second. I'm going to go on to our next panelists. So we have 2 alumni on the line with us. We have Laura May and Melissa Polt. So let's start with Laura. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I am Laura, and I was part of Costa Rica summer program in 2009, and then I went back and was part of Costa Rica year-long program in 2011. I went to Presbyterian College in South Carolina, and I wanted to study abroad, but my school was so small, so I decided I would go away during summer, and so that's how I found WorldTeach. And I fell in love with Costa Rica, so I decided to graduate a semester early and went down for the year-long program. And I was placed in a small town, Paquitas, and it was just the most incredible experience ever. So.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we're definitely going to get more into Laura's experience later on. So for now, Melissa, would love to hear about you and how you ended up with WorldTeach.
So yeah, hi everyone. I went to Texas A&M University and majored in meteorology. I love the weather. And I worked for a few years and then decided that I wanted to go live abroad and do a teaching program, a volunteer program. And I knew a couple people that had done WorldTeach previously in China and Chile. And so I decided after talking to them that I wanted to do the program, and I chose Costa Rica because it was Spanish-speaking, and also because you got to live with a family. Some of the programs, I know you were put in housing, and I specifically wanted to live in a town with a family and speaking Spanish. And so I lived in San Gerardo de Dota, and up in the mountains. It was very, very cold at my site. I had a lot of sweatshirts and slept with a hot water bottle to keep warm. And I currently live in Austin.
Fantastic. I also slept with a hot water bottle, so I love hearing that. There are lots of places in these, what we think are hot weather countries, like Costa Rica, like Colombia, that are actually quite cold. So we'll be talking about different placements and climate and all that later. And as a meteorology major, you might be able to help us. Awesome. All right. Thanks, ladies. So we're getting right into it. I know some of our attendees have just joined us. Thank you, guys. You just missed a bit of the introduction of our alumni on the line, but no te preocupes, don't worry. We're just going to get right into actually, what we're doing in the field, which is the most important. So this is a quick slide to introduce, why we're actually in Costa Rica. So actually, Costa Rica is WorldTeach's oldest running program, having been there since 1989. We were first invited directly by the Costa Rican president himself, Oscar Arias, to teach English in rural secondary schools. So we now work directly through the Ministry of Public Education in Costa Rica. So it's important to say that we are only there because they are asking for us. They are dedicated to having our volunteers, and therefore we're helping them with the needs that they've already identified, which is English in rural communities. Flynn, do you want to add kind of your perspective on, the relationship between WorldTeach and the ministry, or why you think our program has been so successful there for so long?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a very long-standing, obviously, relationship. No partnership is perfect, but ours with the Ministry of Public Education has obviously been solid, and through good communication, and I think the biggest part is similar goals and similar wants for the country. That's kind of been how we've continued so well with the Ministry of Education. Education is a big part of Costa Rica in general and its culture. I believe a quarter of the yearly general budget is devoted to education. And obviously, as many of you will know, tourism is the biggest commodity here for Costa Rica, so the knowledge of English is more than ever important and necessary for jobs and future well-beings in general. Specifically, we go to the more rural areas because there is still a need there. The current qualified number of Costa Rican English teachers is not enough for them to be able to reach every school. So we fill that void. We only go to schools where there isn't an English program or an English teacher already established, minus our bilingual schools, which we can also get into in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But yeah. Besides just the lack of teachers to be able to go to every single school, there is something that comes with having native speakers and teachers that actually live in the communities, which our volunteers do, and most of the ministry teachers do not. We're able to kind of become fully integrated in the community and be on top of teaching and providing native accents and native colloquialisms, developing community projects, community needs, and enriching a cultural exchange between two countries.
Awesome. Fantastic. That's great. And that's why you've joined us tonight, because, you're right there hands-on working with these people. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's, from my own experience as a volunteer and being a student and being a teacher, there's really nothing sadder than meeting an English teacher in any part of the world that doesn't really speak the language perfectly. And so to be able to help those people learn the language and to be able to teach students correctly, those are luxuries that we're very, very lucky to have. So thanks, Flynn, and let's move on. All right, so support for the volunteer and the volunteer fee. This is extremely important stuff to cover, so I like to get it out there up front because it's not the most exciting, but it's probably the most important. So what does this volunteer fee cover? Because I know that you've already seen it online. As you see, the list is extensive, but first it's super important for me to note that, the Ministry of Education, they're the one, again, inviting us there and therefore funding this program. So in some of the countries where we work, we get tons of funding, and in others we get a little bit less funding. So our Costa Rica program is very expensive, as you can see. It costs about $10,000 for a volunteer for the year, and that's, everything to support them for the year. So our partner is giving us essentially 50% of that, and the volunteer is covering the rest. So we do huge amounts of fundraising, and, we give the volunteers ideas for fundraising. We can get them in touch with previous alumni who were super successful with that, people who have raised more than even their volunteer fee, enough to buy their flight, enough to buy computers that they then donate to their schools. So that is something that everybody does, especially for our program in Costa Rica. So important to put that out there, but I just want to quickly go through this list. So this fee is covering, your visa sponsor, your Costa Rica work visa, your housing, your monthly stipend. So some of that is actually, coming back to you. Your health and emergency evacuation, your orientation, and other training aspects that we'll get into more detail later on. Our training actually is a huge pillar for us in terms of volunteer support, so we're going to get into that in more detail later. But again, this money is definitely a barrier to a lot of people, so please reach out to us if you want to talk about fundraising in more depth. Anything to add on that? No, I think we're good. So these are the logistics, which are very, very important, but not the most, exciting part of it. So let's kind of get into the real work that we're doing there, where all this money is going. So teaching in Costa Rica. Okay, so first off, I'm sure that many of you are thinking, I've never taught before. How am I going to know what to do? So as I mentioned previously, orientation and training are huge for us. I would say it's the reason why I was successful last year and why I am still associated with the organization, because we take this very seriously. We recognize we are not sending trained teachers. So when you first get to the country, you have like a 3 to 4 week orientation. So that's when you're going to be doing teacher training every day. So that's, lesson planning, creating assessments, classroom management, which is of course the most difficult. And then you're actually going to be doing a teaching practicum. So you'll get in the classroom while you still have the support from the field director and from your other volunteers to actually teach, because we know that those first few days are very difficult. So we also give you a curriculum that has been designed specifically for Costa Rica and specifically towards the age group that you're going to be teaching. And this is in case that your school doesn't have an existing curriculum. There's a good chance they will. There's a good chance, excuse me, that they won't. And so this is to help you along with that. Now, also part of orientation is language immersion. I'm sure you're also wondering, do I have to know Spanish? Will everybody except for me know Spanish? No, you do not have to know it. It will not help or hurt you in your application. We have language immersion classes every single day. So at least after those 3 to 4 weeks, you're going to be able to find your way around town, ask for the bus, buy food, etc. And then just natural immersion happens, and it's sink or swim. And I promise you that everybody that shows up with beginner Spanish or even no Spanish, you will swim. Don't worry. There are lots of people to help you. It will be difficult, but that is why we joined WorldTeach for this challenge. Another part of the support that we get through our teacher training is our teacher quality program, is what we call it. And those are coordinators that are here in my office in Boston, and you are in touch with them every month to submit lesson plans, assessments, so that they can respond, to see how you're doing in the classroom, to make sure that you're comfortable, to see why a lesson plan worked or didn't work, to make sure that, you're going forward and growing as a teacher. So that's enough about training for this moment. Flynn, Since you oversee all of the volunteers there, in general, could you speak to kind of, what the average class size or resources are that volunteers will be facing?
Absolutely, definitely. So the class size, the average I would say is around 40. Especially last year, we went to some of the bigger schools in our program and bigger sites. This year, the smallest class is, or the smallest school is actually Laura's old school, Moijones, with about 29 students, I believe. And then the largest in the rural program is around 90 students. And obviously, in the bigger schools, the more resources, the more school staff there is, the more teachers there are of specific grade teachers, special ed teachers. So they have that kind of as support and resources. In terms of English resources, you could be placed at a site that's had a volunteer for 12 straight years, so you'll have a lot to go off of in terms of note cards and flashcards and English books. You could also be placed at a site that's only been a site for a year, or even a new site, which would mean that there probably wouldn't be as much in terms of resources. With that said, as Brooke mentioned, at orientation you will receive the curriculum book, the English curriculum book that the Education Office in Boston has designed specifically for Costa Rica, which is based off of the English curriculum for Costa Rica, and we actually send our curriculum to the MEP, to the Ministry of Education, for their use as well, as kind of a template for their curriculum. So every volunteer will have that to start out with, and then other things for like classroom creativities, scissors, glue, markers, all that kind of stuff you can find down here pretty easily. So even if your school might not be as well-resourced, there's definitely ways to overcome that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. Melissa, so would you tell us about your school, where you were working, what age students, what you enjoyed the most, and what I'd say was the most, culturally challenging for you as an individual, as a teacher, etc.?
Yeah, my school was actually very small, a lot smaller than I think the ones in past years. I only had about 15 to 20 students that I taught English, and then including kinder. I think the whole school had about 20 students, so very small, and there were a lot of books and resources that previous teachers had used and left in the classroom. So I did bring my own things from home, but there was a good amount of resources. It's kind of just like a luck of the draw, what you can find in the classroom. And I definitely made certain things and went to town and would make flashcards and certain things like that. The part I found probably most difficult was just communicating with my director. Our school was very small, and the director was the only other teacher besides the kinder teacher. She taught all 6 grades, all subjects, and I was the only other teacher, and I taught English. And I did not know much Spanish, and so it was difficult to try to get her to communicate with me. Just the scheduling the day, and but WorldTeach helped me a lot because I tried really hard to split up my classes so that I didn't have all the grades all at once, because everybody's at a different learning level, and WorldTeach assisted me with that, in talking to her, and so that was really great. And that was probably one of the hardest parts, but once we got that figured out, I had so much fun, and it was a great school.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. Laura, how about yourself? Tell us about your school, who you were teaching, what age, and what you struggled with the most, or what you thrived with, what you enjoyed the most.
Okay, yeah, very similar to Melissa. My school was very small as well. about 29 students, kindergarten through 6th grade. And I taught first grade through 6th grade, and then I taught kindergarten once a week. Like Melissa's school, my director was the only other teacher besides the kinder teacher, and she taught every subject to every grade. And I think the hardest part for me was I was the first year-long volunteer. There had only ever been a summer volunteer before me the year before. So the students had no English experience, pretty much. Very, very limited English experience. So it was a good thing because I could start from the beginning, but it also was very difficult because they barely even knew the alphabet. So that was probably the biggest struggle for me, but using my resources, like other teachers, and asking other teachers what was working for them, other volunteers in the country, and looking through the resource book that had been put together from previous teachers, that really helped me. With the small classes, that was helpful because it's easier to focus on individual students, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I have a question. Had you taught before joining WorldTeach?
No, I did the summer program
Yes.
in Costa Rica, but that was my only teaching experience. And I taught, and when I was doing the summer program, it was in high school. Mm-hmm. So it was different than teaching the elementary school children. It was a completely different experience.
Absolutely. Now, Flynn, all of the placements will be in elementary schools, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Now, would you be able to speak about our placements in the bilingual schools?
Sure, definitely. So like the rural sites, we go to the bilingual sites because there is a huge need for us. We go to the only 2 public bilingual schools in the country, which after a partnership in rural areas with the MEP, we decided to expand our program and go to these 2 sites. One is in La Fortuna de San Carlos, which is up in the rainforest. When you think of the jungle of Costa Rica and zip lining, that's where you go. And then our other placement is in Manuel Antonio, which is voted by, I want to say Former's, the travel guidebook, as the 12th prettiest beach in the world. So you'll be right around there if you express interest in that placement. These schools are quite a bit larger than the rural placements. I believe Manuel Antonio has about 220 students, and La Fortuna has about 400. But the major difference in these sites is that you co-teach alongside Costa Rican teachers because they are bilingual sites, so there are already English teachers in place at the school. However, you guide to help them manage the larger class sizes, to offer a native accent, which is really, really important in these areas since most of these students' future and well-being depend on being able to speak, not only just speak English, but be able to relate to tourists in a way that, make the tourists feel comfortable using their own sort of colloquialisms and accents and just ways to understand that they know the culture of the U.S. and other, and other English-speaking countries. The volunteers that are placed at these sites are also, that's not to say that the volunteers at the rural sites aren't models, but these students are in larger areas, more touristy areas where they're exposed to probably more negative things and more just life in general at a younger age than in the rural areas. So the volunteers are definitely great mentors and motivators for, healthy habits in terms of eating and just in daily life, exercising, values, all that sort of thing. The other difference with the bilingual placements is that on top of teaching English, you also teach science in English. So you have that added aspect and added opportunity of expanding your teaching skills with a different subject.
Awesome. Fantastic. And we place about how many volunteers in the bilingual schools?
Great question. There are 2 volunteers. There are 4 volunteers in total, and they go, 2 go to one site and 2 go to the other site. So
Okay.
not only will you be co-teaching, you'll also have a WorldTeach compañero with you at all times. Although you teach separately, you teach with different co-teachers, and you have different schedules. You'll be placed with separate host families as well, but you will have kind of that added automatic support right there with you.
And will you tell our non-Spanish speakers what compañero means?
If I can think of the word in English. Not partner, but just fellow volunteer. I speak English, sorry.
I know, believe me, me too.
I'm sure now Melissa and Laura do too.
Oh,
yeah. It's
That's
part of
awesome.
the Costa Rican experience, is speaking Spanish at the end of it.
You brought up a lot of good points that we're going to address momentarily about host families, about that placement as to who's being placed. How do you know if you're going to be in a bilingual school? Exactly. How do you express interest in a bilingual role? Are you chosen for it? So give me just one moment, and we're going to get into that placement process. Before I switch the screen, would you all agree, ladies, panelists, that one second, something happened to my screen. Would you all agree that being flexible in all of these schools and being resourceful are things that are necessary for any WorldTeach volunteer to be successful?
Most definitely. Especially flexible, because you never know. In Costa Rica, it seems there's a Catholic holiday every other day, and you may not know if it's happening or not. And you may find out the night before that class is canceled and you had a test planned that day. And so just being able to be flexible and not hold your hopes up that you're going to have a test the day you want a test or things like that. So.
Yes, that's very, very important to note. That there's no schedule like an American schedule. Like everything else that happens in a country like Costa Rica is going to be as free-flowing as possible in comparison to what most people listening have experienced in their own like school experiences or professional experiences. So, class might not start on time, or your students might not be there, or school will be canceled and you won't even know. So those can be very difficult things to deal with at the beginning, but then you eventually actually see yourself slowing down with it as well. And it can be a beautiful thing as long as you still bring, your dedication to it, because you are a teacher. You're an absolute professional, and you still have to be at school, like even if your students are out playing soccer. But it's something that I think takes an adjustment. So it's the pura vida, right? Yeah. So on that aspect, getting into actually living in Costa Rica, life outside of the classroom. So I'm first going to get into the placement process and how that happens and how you find out where your life is going to be. So if and when you are accepted, you fill out what we call a volunteer profile form. So this is where you list your preferences as to, what sort of community you want to live in. Obviously, the majority of our placements as we've discussed, in Costa Rica are all rural. They're all in, small communities, and they're all in elementary schools. But this is where you say, I worked with kids in the past, and so I'm definitely meant for elementary education, and I do want to live with a host family. I want to live far away from other volunteers, or I want to live closer to other volunteers. Or, for example, I want to work at one of these bilingual schools. Perhaps you have science experience, and that will make you a great candidate for that placement. Or, you really want that WorldTeach compañera or compañero. You want to be with that other volunteer. So this is where you fill out all of those preferences, and then based off of your experiences and your actual preferences, the field director will place you where he or she thinks where you will be the most successful. In some of our countries, we have a lot more variety in the placements, but again, in Costa Rica, you have to be interested in elementary education and living in a rural area, because that's essentially the majority, if not all, of our placements. And then, Flynn, ideally, would you say that volunteers receive their placement like a couple weeks before they depart for Costa Rica?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. We try to get it out, we say early to mid-December, so that gives you at least generally about 3 weeks, if not a month, before you would leave, where you find out your placements, which entail 3 different sort of letters that have any and all information that you can hopefully think of. And if not, then the volunteer who was there previously leaves all their contact information for the new volunteer to be able to get in touch with them.
Awesome.
So yeah, hopefully this year might be a little bit different too, but hopefully by mid-December.
And I'm glad that you're stressing hopefully, because guys, as we just said in the last slide, you need to be flexible. These placements are not always secured until kind of the last minute, and this is because we're working, with the Ministry of Education, and they're securing housing and securing school requests, because again, we're only going into the schools that are requesting our volunteers, and so you must be flexible and patient. You will find out before you leave so that you can pack accordingly, because as we said, a lot of these regions have very different climates, and you need to know where you're going so you can prepare and kind of educate yourself as much as possible on the area that you're about to move to. Okay, great. So that's the volunteer profile form. As I mentioned, all of our placements are essentially rural. The bilingual placements, there are fewer of those, and those might be in more touristy areas, so a bit less rural. Flynn, would you say that, and I'm not familiar with the size of Costa Rica, so assuming, me and the rest of the listeners out there, we don't know too much about the country, how close or far away are most volunteers from each other or from a major city?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And those are preferences that you guys can stress on the profile form when you fill it out. We always are able to guarantee that we cater to your top choice or your top preference. Beyond that, we try our hardest. So if location to another volunteer is really important to you, we really take that into account. On average, I would say there is no site that's further than an hour from their hub town, which is a larger area that will have internet cafes, different kinds of restaurants, like pizza or Italian restaurants or Chinese food, for you to kind of get that sort of fix. A grocery store, places to make copies, and all of that. So usually no volunteers further than like an hour, max 2 hours, depending on the weather. We are currently in the rainy season, so sometimes, depending on the weather, buses take longer. But yeah, generally within 1 or 2 hours from a major city, where there's, besides just those things of amenities, there's also clinics and hospitals if you get really sick and you can't find what you need in your site. And as well with those, there are always a few volunteers, depending on the size of the group, near each hub town. So that means that you guys can meet up in your bigger areas and will be no further than about an hour away from another volunteer.
That's great. And to put that in perspective, last year I lived in Bogota, which is a major city, the capital of Colombia, and I was probably an hour away from other volunteers that also lived in Bogota, and that's because the city was so huge and there was such terrible traffic, and we were in the same city. So I'd say an hour is pretty good, because this is immersion. This is for you to be part of your own community, but of course it's also nice to have that comfort of other, whether it's North Americans or English speakers, other volunteers, etc., that you can kind of connect with. All right, let's get right to the alumni about your experiences. So Melissa, let's start with you. We would love to hear about where you lived, who you lived with, because I believe you mentioned that your host family was something that you were really looking forward to. So tell us about that experience, also the amenities that you had or didn't have, especially things like running water, electricity, internet, and any struggles that you faced.
Okay, yeah. Like I said, my town was up in the mountains. It was very cold, and the house that I lived in, I think my town was a little bit of an anomaly in that it was a tourist town that had a lot of hotels. I think the town only had about 150 people, but they had a lot of hotels and a lot of tourists that came through to go bird watching, and so that was probably the best part because there was always tourists coming through who spoke English, and then I could talk to them. But if there were no tourists, then it was all Spanish. And my house that I lived in was pretty big compared to most typical Costa Rican houses, and it had about, I don't know, 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, and I had my own room. That is part of the placement, is that you have your own room. I shared bathrooms with everyone, but in that the town that I lived in was a little more upscale. We always had running water. We always had hot water. We always had electricity, I think, except for one time when it stormed. And I also always had internet, and that is something that most people don't always have. So I feel very fortunate that I had internet and I was able to communicate. But it was good sometimes if it went out that I could let loose. And my town was very nice, and everybody was so nice. And there were so many people at my house that it was always people coming in and out, and coming from a small family. It was great. And I loved sitting with them at night, watching TV, or eating dinner with them. And then they actually were doing construction in our town for some new hotels. And so all of the construction workers would come over to our house every day for lunch and dinner. And so I got to play waitress every time they came over, and that was a lot of fun to do that with my family. So
That's awesome. So it doesn't sound like there were many struggles over there, but like I'm sure that perhaps at the beginning, I mean, it's quite an adjustment living with strangers, and obviously if you don't know the language.
Yes. My host mom did not speak any English, but I did live in a town that did have English speakers because they worked at the hotels, and so my host sister did speak fluent English, and that was, I talked to her, and she actually would always talk to me in English, but I always talked to my host mom in Spanish. So that was definitely something to get used to. Another thing was that I did not have a direct bus to my town. The bus would run and drop off at the entrance to my town, and so it was about an hour-and-a-half walk if I could not find a ride, and so that was another thing with my town, but I don't think that is what most of the sites have.
Yeah, public transportation is a whole nother conversation in a lot of these countries, and I'd say that's like half of the fun and also the struggle of living in a Latin country. Right. Awesome. Okay, Melissa, thank you. Laura, tell us about your placement. So again, where you lived, with whom, what sort of amenities you had, what you found to be difficult about it, or unexpected, or just beautiful.
Yeah, I'm going to go with just beautiful. I was placed in a town called Paquitas. It was also in the mountains, but not as cold. It would get chilly at night, but it was actually kind of nice to have a breeze at night. But during the day, it was pretty hot. And I actually taught in the neighboring town, Mayojones, which was about a 3-mile walk, 2.5, 3-mile walk. I would take the milk truck to school in the morning, and then I would walk home. And sometimes I would catch a ride on the moped with my director, just sort of whatever could get me there. And I lived with a host family who none of them spoke English, and we lived in a tiny house that had 3 bedrooms, and my bedroom, I could literally touch both walls if I spread my arms out. So it was really just like a bed. But it was perfect. It's all I needed. And so 3 bedrooms and a bathroom that we shared. We had hot water, in quotes. I like to call the showers, they're sort of like, it's like a coffee maker. It heats the water as the water comes out. So you have a choice between water pressure or hot water. So depending on how much time you wanted to be in the shower, depended on how hot your water was, pretty much. but it's a small town. All towns in Costa Rica, I believe, from what it seems from where I've visited, have a soccer field, a church, and a school. And so my town was just the same. There was the Catholic church, the soccer field, and the school. So it's just a tiny community, tight-knit. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knows you before you even get there. And everyone's just very interested, and I've found this from traveling throughout Costa Rica. Everyone's just very interested in your story and very respectful of everybody and just wants to get to know the gringa in town. So I loved my community. It was very tight-knit. Most people were related to each other. So yeah.
Awesome. Now you bring up a good point. You just mentioned traveling throughout Costa Rica. So my next question to you both is about, weekends or activities that you got involved in outside of school, or, how you created your life there, whether that's traveling or other things. So, Laura, since you just mentioned that, what did you do outside of school?
I loved to travel, and the cool thing about Costa Rica is the buses seem to be, once you get out of your rural town, the buses seem to be the only thing in Costa Rica that runs on time. And it's great public transportation. You can get anywhere for pretty cheap. So I love to go visit other sites, other volunteers at their sites and see what they were experiencing and meet their host families and get involved in their towns, just meeting people and hearing different stories. And like I said, it's very easy to just hop on a bus and pick a place and go. And so I like to do that on the weekends. Not every weekend, because I also enjoyed being in my town and being with my host family. But it's such an accessible country to go to the beach. I lived in the mountains, so it would be nice to just take the weekend and go to the beach, and it wasn't too much just to do that. So, and to have friends that you could stay with, because I would go visit the bilingual volunteers and the bilingual and Manuel Antonio bilingual site, and I could stay with them for free in their house that they were placed in. So
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to have you address the fact of how you traveled financially in a minute. But
okay.
First, Melissa, what were your weekends looking like, or how did you get involved in the community outside of school?
I would say my answer would be very much similar or exactly the same as Laura. My weekends were mainly spent visiting other volunteers. I think that was one of the best parts about traveling around Costa Rica, was to go and visit everybody's site, because those are the towns that you don't get to normally see if you were to go to Costa Rica on vacation. To go to those towns and to talk to those people, just like Laura said, was amazing. And I kind of made that one of my hobbies, because we had school canceled pretty often, and that I would just go to another site, and I would go to school and help the teacher at that school. And so I think I made it to 14 out of the 19 sites during my year, and some of the people that I visited are now my best friends, and it's great to be able to see what their experience was like. And yeah.
That's really cool. I'm very impressed that you made it to all of those sites and that you helped out in school, because for me, when I was not in school, I was definitely not working at other people's schools.
Yeah, I mean, everyone had school mostly on the days that I didn't, so it was great.
Good for you. That is awesome. Okay, so then since both of you did do a bit of moving around and traveling, how did you afford it? Because this program is expensive. As you see right there, the monthly stipend is like $100 to $200, which is not a lot of money. But how about Melissa? Tell me, how did that translate into Costa Rican, living, the cost of living? And was that money enough for you to travel around, or did you have savings?
Well, I did have savings. But those I reserved for vacations, like when my parents came to visit. And when I had friends from the States come to visit, and I actually went to the resort towns and would do things like that. But on a month-to-month or week-to-week basis, just for the stipend, it covered enough for me because I did not have any other expenses. I mean, I was in a town where you could not buy anything. I didn't have a grocery store or anything, and so I really spent nothing if I was in my town. And then to go and visit another site was only the cost of the bus ticket and maybe a snack along the way. And you stay at somebody's house and you eat their food, and so it was pretty cheap to travel around.
And so where were you finding food if you don't have a grocery store in your town?
Oh, I always ate at my house.
And where do they find food?
Oh, they either have somebody, one of the kids from, when they come in from San Jose, they would bring a cart full of food, or the bread truck, when it came through town, we would get bread, or when the milk truck came through town, or when the fruit truck came through town.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That is like my dream. Please send the bread truck to my office right now.
Yeah. Yeah, they somehow always had food, and they always had enough food. So.
Enough food is very important. Okay, so clearly, you know, the cost of living is obviously low. That we definitely could assume. I had a question from a listener as to how expensive these bus tickets are.
It really depends where you're going, but like, gosh, I'm trying to think of the most expensive one. What would you say, Melissa? Like, to travel to Costa from San Jose, is that like?
From San Jose to San Vito is like $20.
Oh wow. Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
I
The
think
most
that would.
expensive that I've seen is Southern Mill, which is around $14. But that's taking you all the way from San Jose to almost the Panamanian border in the south.
Is that like San Jose to San Vito? Is.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
But normally, if you're going to different sites, like you can go in for like $6 or $8.
Yeah.
It's not a big amount that you have to get anywhere.
Definitely Laura. From a site to a hub town is under $1. It's generally between $1 and $2.
Yeah.
Definitely under a mil, 1,000 colones, which is $2 more or less. And then the buses from San Jose to the hub towns, unless you place in San Vito, which you do have volunteers there, but on average it's probably about 2 mil a bus ticket, or 3 mil, which is about $4 to $6.
okay, awesome. I have a couple more questions about all of these money deals, if you will. Okay, so first of all, everyone's, planning weekends to see each other. I had a great question of how are you communicating with other volunteers to coordinate that travel and to make plans together?
I think starting in 2012, they started allowing anyone can get a cell phone. I think that might have been different in 2011, Laura?
I think that's when it started, was 2011, because that's when my town got a cell phone tower. I know, or not really in my town, but sort of outside my town, you actually got cell phone service. Because when I was there in 2009, you had to like drive halfway down the mountain to even get a bar. So no one had cell phones. But then I think pretty much all of our volunteers, I would say, 90% of us had a cell phone.
And how much do those cell phones cost?
I bought a little itty bitty, retro phone, and I think it was $40 for the phone, and then you prepay for the minutes.
Yes.
My little card.
Yeah, and you prepay. I never had more than $4 or $5 worth of minutes on my phone.
Like a month, like you could use one card that cost you like $4 would last me months. So.
Yeah.
All right, and one more financial question. Now, this is a good question. Someone's asking, where do you keep your U.S. money while you are staying with a host family? Now, in my own experience, I'm going to say you do not bring U.S. money to a foreign country. But Flynn, I want you to answer this. Do you encourage volunteers to bring U.S. currency with them or no?
I would say a little to get them through if they want, but not very much, because it's more expensive to get money changed than it is to bring down a debit card and be able to take out money that way. And in every hub town, there'll be ATMs where they can take out money.
Perfect.
In terms of having loads of money in the host families, it's like in any situation. You are, although you're a permanent guest in their house, you still are. So keep your things neat and keep things that you don't want touched and messed with out of sight. But generally keeping, important, valuable things in the host family's houses are not an issue at all.
Okay. And from my opinion as living in Colombia and just traveling in general, you bring a lock with you for your computer. You bring a lock for your passport and your money. In some countries, if you're seen with U.S. currency, you get more attention than you need. So I might be a little paranoid when it comes to these things because I did live in Colombia, but I think this now makes me a better traveler. So you just need to be very conscientious of it, especially when you're in either a very local town or a very touristy town. So, okay, all really great questions. We're going to go on very quickly to just one very important topic about actually applying, and then we'll answer more questions. So, Caitlin, can you help us with this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just go through it really quickly because I'm sure you guys are eager to have more questions answered. And a lot of you guys are already really familiar with this process. You've already begun it, or you're in the second stage, or you've already finished. So real quickly, the requirements for programs that are year-long like Costa Rica, you need to be a native or native level English speaker of any nationality and hold a bachelor's degree. Teaching experience is not necessary. It's not obligatory. This is a question I get a lot. Really, we just want to see a commitment to service, a commitment to learning, and a commitment to being flexible in the face of challenges, especially when it comes to teaching. Your first year teaching, no matter where you are, is tough. And it's something that you need to really commit yourself to. So that's definitely the thing that we look for above all, just dedication and flexibility. So the items that are needed, the first stage to be considered for the second stage, you would need to put in a resume, a personal statement, and a college transcript. And then from there, I would invite you on to the second stage, which you would have 2 letters of recommendation submitted on your behalf. And you would also interview with me. I've already interviewed with a lot of you, so I'm thrilled to see your names on here. And it's always so nice to meet you guys virtually. But that is what you would need to do. The deadline is October 15th. So this is for the January departure. And applications are accepted on a rolling basis, so it's really first come, first serve. We have, a certain number of spots that we need to fill for the Costa Rica program. I would definitely suggest that if you don't have all the necessary materials in, that you try to get them in as soon as possible. And, there's always a little wiggle room when it comes to getting the interview done or getting those final letters of recommendation in, but at the same time you want to make sure that you act quickly to make sure that you have a spot. So I would definitely suggest getting all those materials in sooner rather than later. And then after you apply and after you've completed your application, you would just receive an email from me notifying you that everything's complete, and then you'd need to wait approximately 2 to 3 weeks to find out about the final decision.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Now, let's see. I have a question for Laura, and this is everyone's final opportunity to text in your questions if you have them, because we're just approaching the 8 o'clock hour. Laura, tell us, yes. You met your husband down in Costa Rica.
I did.
Tell us about that and kind of just like really the lasting impression and connection that you can make with a country. Like, this is not just a year, this is not just a trip. Like, this is, this changes your life. And I think you're a good example of that.
it definitely changed my life. And I remember before I went, it was my mom's biggest fear that I would meet a guy and never come back. And I was like, Mom, you're crazy. But so I met him. His whole family lived in my town, and I knew literally almost every single person in his family but him. And I finally met him in August. They do a walk to a church in Cartago. It's a Catholic holiday for the Virgin of Los Angeles, I believe. And I went to stay with my best friend, who happened to be his cousin. And at the same time, he was moving back to the town that I was living in. So we met and just ended up spending all of our time together. And after I moved, I came back in December to the States when the program was over. And I thought that I would get a job here and just sort of phase him out of my mind. But within 3 weeks, I was on a plane back to Costa Rica. So
those Latins.
Yep. So and then we went through all of the long, lovely process of visas for him, and he got to move here last year, and we got married last summer. And his family's still in Costa Rica, and we've been back. We just went back in July to visit, and they were. I mean, it really is my home away from home now, and I just, yeah, Costa Rican people are the nicest, most welcoming. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your background is. They are so welcoming. They're so respectful of everybody. And they're just so interested in learning people's stories and where you come from. So I immediately felt at home there, and I immediately felt at home in his family when I started dating him. And so, yeah.
Awesome.
It's a very different experience than I ever had dating an American. So.
Definitely a good story, because the reality is, you know, you do make connections for life. It's a lot about what you're doing in the classroom, but it's also your life as well. All right, awesome. Thank you, Laura. So another question from our listeners. So TEFL certification, same thing as getting married. Our TEFL certification, for those that don't know, that's teaching English as a foreign language. And that's a certification that allows you to get a full-time teaching job abroad. Now, Flynn, you can help me out with this. We offer our TEFL certification. That's an accredited certificate through WorldTeach. We offer that in all of our programs except for our bilingual programs, correct? Our bilingual placements, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Awesome.
Any other, yeah, all rural applicants have the opportunity. And the only reason is that half the bilingual classes will be in science.
Sorry, say that once more.
Half the English, or half the classes at the bilingual sites are in science and English, not pure English, which I believe is,
yes.
And they're co-teaching. They're not in their own classroom.
Okay, so that's really good to note. If the volunteer is looking to sign up for the TEFL certification, which is an additional thing, that is not available at the bilingual placements. And again, that TEFL certification is optional, and in my experience, I recommend doing it. I regret not doing it personally, because every volunteer, regardless of whether they're doing TEFL or not, is submitting monthly documents, that's the lesson plan and assessment, etc., to our office here in Boston, and that's so that we can help you in the classroom. Our TEFL certificate, or our TEFL volunteers, all that they are doing in addition is submitting, I believe, an additional lesson plan and some footage of them actually teaching in the classroom, and like reflection questions and that sort of thing. And then after the year, you have certification that follows with you forever. So I do recommend it. So thank you, Flynn. Okay, last question, and then I think we're going to call it an evening. Was there a fee for getting a visa in Costa Rica? So yes, that is part of why you join WorldTeach, because for me personally, I wanted to go move to Colombia and get some fancy expat job. but I had never taught before. I didn't have my TEFL certification, and I knew nobody was going to support my work visa. Obviously, we know it's a tough economy out there, and many people are not giving work visas to foreigners. So yes, that is why WorldTeach works directly with the Ministry of Education to get those work visas for you. So that the fee for that is included. That's part of the whole volunteer fee. So yes, there is a fee for that. Okay, any other questions or comments? Going once. Ladies, anything you want to add?
No, thanks for chiming in and listening, and hope this was helpful. You guys, I don't know if you have my email address, but feel free to ask it from Caitlin or Brooke after this. And any questions that you guys have at any time in the process of applying or confirming, by all means, do not hesitate to reach out to me.
Yes, awesome. Flynn, thank you so much. So on that note, when you're going through the application process, if and when you are accepted, we can get you in touch with other alumni as well, besides those that are on the phone. We have what's called country experts, and they're people that have just left Costa Rica that are super excited to talk about their experience. So yes, we are all here to answer more questions. So thank you guys so much. We'll be sending some follow-up information. Let us know if you have any questions. Nos vemos muy pronto in Costa Rica. We'll see you very soon in Costa Rica. And thank you all. Have a good night.